Okay, today we're going to be looking at House Mormont of Bear Island. It's quite an old and honourable house loyal to the Starks of Winterfell. Their words are, "Here we stand." So, I guess first things first, we'll look at the members of this house. So, the first mention of the Mormonts happened when King Roderick Stark won Bear Island in a wrestling match, apparently against an Ironborn king who controlled it at the time. He then gave it to his loyal friends, and probably stewards, the Mormonts. For this reason, the Mormonts owe everything they have to the Starks, and they were incredibly loyal to them, all the way up to Robert's Rebellion. Now, during the time of the War of the Usurper, or Robert's Rebellion, the Lord of Bear Island was Jorah Mormont. Now, you probably know him as being the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch during the events of Game of Thrones. When Ned Stark called his banners to avenge his brother and father for what the Mad King Aerys Targaryen II did to them, the Mormonts were quick to respond, and Jorah Mormont led the men of Bear Island into battle alongside the Starks and all of the other Northern Lords. Now, 5 years after the events of the War of the Usurper, Jorah Mormont actually abdicated as the Lord of Bear Island in favour of his son, Jorah Mormont. Now, Jorah actually went and joined the Night's Watch, and that's where he eventually became the Lord Commander. Now, Jorah we obviously know from the show, so we'll get on to him. We know a lot more about Jorah. 1 year after he was made Lord of Bear Island, the Greyjoy Rebellion happened. Now, if you haven't seen the video, I'd maybe go recommend that you see it, because it's quite factual. Anyway, this is basically when the Greyjoys went and declared themselves as King of the Iron Islands and tried to secede from the Seven Kingdoms. You can guess it didn't go well. We know that the Starks, the Tullys, the Baratheons, and, well, what remained of the Lannister fleet soon headed off to Pike after some swift victories at sea to reclaim the Iron Islands and put them under the Crown's rule. Jorah, being the Lord of Bear Island and actually very close to the Iron Islands, obviously took part in the battle. In fact, it's said at the Siege of Pike he was one of the first ones into the breach, right behind Thoros of Myr with his flaming sword. Jorah fought very gallantly, and he received a knighthood from King Robert Baratheon himself. This brought great honour to both his house and to the north. But this poster boy of the north didn't just stop there. At the Torrey in Lannisport, to celebrate the victory over the Greyjoys, he was said to be the best lancer there, and won great amounts of trophies and a lot of wealth from it. It was also at the Torrey in Lannisport where he met his second wife, Lyanessa Hightower, who he actually named Queen of Love and Beauty. This is basically the right that the champion of the jousting tournament gets. It's kind of just a big compliment. That night he asked Lord Hightower for the permission to marry his daughter, and surprisingly he said yes, and they were wed. Unfortunately, this is where things start to go downhill for him. Now, the Hightowers is actually a house from the Reach. For this reason they were incredibly rich, and Bear Island is a lot of things, but wealthy is not one of them. Lyanessa soon got bored and miserable of Bear Island's harsh conditions and very basic living style, and Jorah, trying to impress his wife, who he did love, started to lavish her with all of the fine things that her old lifestyle offered. The only problem is, House Mormont is not rich, as we'll find out in a minute. Whilst paying for Lyanessa's fine lifestyle, Jorah managed to accumulate a huge amount of debt, and one thing led to another, and the only way he could pay it off was by selling poachers. Now, these poachers were basically people who were illegally hunting on Bear Island, which is a crime, yes, but the crime that Jorah did, which is selling people into slavery to a slaver from Essos, is a lot worse than that. When the Starks found out about Jorah's crime, they knew it was their job to bring him to justice, and basically, to avoid Ned Stark's sword going through his neck, Jorah fled to Essos. By the time the Starks arrived, all that was left was the family sword, Longclaw. As if to add insult to injury, Jorah and Lynessa arrived in Essos, and Lynessa obviously realised that she wasn't going to get that lavish lifestyle that she loved, and went and found another man who could give it to her. All the while, Jorah was fighting as a sellsword, trying to get as much money as he could to fund Lysa's lifestyle, leaving Jorah with nothing, exiled from his country, and that's pretty much where we take off in Game of Thrones. Now let's talk about the island itself, the people, and a bit more about the house. Now, I mentioned Longclaw. This is the family's ancestral sword. It's Valyrian steel. Now, interestingly enough, House Mormont's one of the only sub-houses to have a Valyrian steel sword. Not even the Lannisters have one, much to their annoyance. Anyway, it's what's called a bastard sword. It's kind of a cross between a long sword and a great sword in size. It's kind of sometimes called a hand or a half sword. When Jorah left, he left it back on Bear Island for his father, who then eventually gave it to you-know-who, Jon Snow, who still wields it to this day. It's actually why there's like a bear on top of the sword. It's to represent Bear Island and House Mormont. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Bear Island. Bear Island is a reasonably large island along the northern coastline. It's there at the far reaches of the north, and just north of Deepwood Motte, if you know where that is. We don't actually really get to see its position anywhere, so I'm not sure if that's a good way of comparing it to anything. Anyway, it's a pretty poor island. It's covered in tall pines, quite large mountains and hills, not many natural resources, and for this reason, well, since it's an island, majority of its finance is brought about by fishing. Now, interestingly enough, Bear Island is really quite far up north. In fact, just north of Bear Island is land that's officially classed as beyond the wall. In fact, wildlings from the frozen shore actually sometimes head down and raid Bear Island, because obviously there's no wall in the way. For this reason, wildlings from the frozen shore often sail a little bit south to Bear Island to raid it. Now, the wildlings at the frozen shore actually use giant dog-ridden sleds into battle, which, I mean, is pretty cool. Of course, the men are always off fishing, so the wildlings try to see it as easy prey. But unlike in the rest of Westeros, women on Bear Island have learnt to adapt to this. Many of the women are actually great warriors on Bear Island, and have on many occasions driven the wildlings back into the sea. With their main source of income being fishing, the Mormonts can only be so wealthy. For this reason, they're one of the only families in Westeros who do not have a stone keep, which is kind of like the norm, no matter how big or small. Instead, the Mormonts have a wooden keep, and it's surrounded by a large palisade. Now, a palisade's basically kind of sharpened logs. It acts as quite a good defensive wall, but it's far less sturdy and far less grand than a wonderful stone keep. So, that's pretty much all you'll have to know about House Mormont. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please, if you have got any questions, pop them down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment and subscribe, and check out some of the other lore videos I've got going on. See you next time.